Hi, my name is Hava. I am a visual artist. I paint primarily. My work is very colorful, sort of abstract, and a lot of botanical motifs, aquatic motifs, and sometimes just psychedelic motifs. I've been painting for over 25 years, but I've been an artist for much longer, and I used to be a photographer before that. So photography is still something that I use a lot in my work, primarily as like a inspiration source. As a photographer, I loved photographing abstractions, reflections, and patterns, but I also liked to photograph people, and at some point I became more of a documentary photographer, and it seemed to fit at the time because it was clear what I wanted to say. But as I progressed as an artist, what I wanted to say was less and less about what's out there in the world and more about what's in my own head, sort of like a more self-referential kind of content. And I turned to drawing and painting. In 2009, I was living in Manhattan, and I had a pretty hectic life managing a company and just existing in a huge metropolis. And my situation changed, and I ended up moving for 18 months to a tiny cabin in the Hamptons. I was there primarily off season. I was just a mile from the beach. I had a swimming pool right outside my door. It was very beautiful. I think this is when my connection to nature really started to develop, and my connection to trees. I would walk to the beach and back, or just around some of the estates, and I would do it 12 months out of the year, every season. So I would see the changes in the season, but not just that, I would see those changes on the exact same trees. And by having that kind of like starting point, or by having something there that I knew well, like the same tree in the same landscape, but watching how it changes and how the environment around it changes and how the light around it changes, because sometimes it has no leaves, sometimes it has little baby green leaves, sometimes it has flowers, sometimes it's bright orange. And it really helped cement my connection to nature, and notice that I too go through different changes during different seasons, and they're not much different from the tree. If you abstract them one level, I certainly don't change into orange hair, but in some ways there is a different energy that happens in the fall, and then a very different energy that happens in the winter. My work is inspired by nature, and more than that, it's about my personal relationship to nature. And a lot of time, the way something starts is I go for a walk, and I always have a camera with me. These days, it's just my phone. And if I see something, even just from the corner of my eye, if something catches my eye, I stop and I take a photograph, because I know that how to photograph something that I just had a glimpse of. And I just collect these photographs. And what I'm doing is collecting elements in nature that are meaningful to me. I like to say that I'm collecting patterns. I'm always looking for patterns. And by that, I mean actual patterns. Like, there are certain elements that are pretty much in all of my paintings. All my paintings have tentacles, and all my paintings have little batches of circles. A lot of my paintings have branches. Yeah, a lot of them have branches, and sort of these biomorphic shapes. And what fascinates me about the patterns is that nature is really good at doing what it does best with the least amount of effort, the simplest ingredients, no toxic waste. And the same sort of elements get used in all kinds of places, all kinds of organisms. So for example, the little circles, sometimes they are eggs, sometimes they are pollen, sometimes they're bubbles on top of a pond. So they have a lot of different purposes. Even a honeycomb is basically just a collection of circles to me with edges. And what's important is their size and their placement. And I think, to me, by repeating these patterns so I would have the same shapes in a botanical piece and in an aquatic piece or in just a very abstract piece, I am connecting all of these different worlds, all of these different locations and the different organisms. I'm connecting them into one entity. I love biology, living sciences. I love reading about this stuff, and I absolutely love looking at images and prehistoric aquatic landscapes, like the kind you'd see in dioramas in science museums, are just fascinating to me, because what you're seeing is all these new life forms that are evolving, and you're literally seeing how they all have very similar elements to them in the way they're shaped, the way things connect, tentacles, eggs. And you start to understand that as organisms evolve, they keep those things that work well, and then they, perfect others. And the Cambrian explosion is especially fascinating because it was like a sudden explosion of a lot of different life. And it's not that I did not think that that's what I was painting. It's after I finished the painting and I looked at it, I realized that's what it reminds me of. I have several areas where I'm using circles, but I'm using them in very different ways. So in some places they do look like eggs. In other places they look like bubbles or some kind of a network that holds something in place, maybe even like coral. And then I have shapes that seem to burst out of them. There's a lot of tentacles. There's a lot of jellyfish type of imagery. There's images that is that kind of pancake stack, or what I call my termite hill. But here I'm using it as a body of, a jellyfish. And I feel like this is one painting where I didn't want to use black. I used dark blue, but I wanted to have contrast with color. So there's a lot of places where I have bright orange and that chartreuse lime green against, colors that are complementary to create this kind of vibration. Things are moving. And I feel like this one is very successful. It's also one of my more abstract paintings. When I was in grad school, one of the things that we all did as graduate students is teach a class. And I got to teach some Art 101 classes to students who have never taken art. And then I also taught some preliminary sculpture classes. And sculpture is not really my medium, so a friend recommended this book to me. It's called No More Secondhand Art by Peter London. And the idea of this book is that we shouldn't try to copy other styles or other artists, but rather find our own voice. And it's a compilation of exercises that you can do to help you find your voice. And this book, I did use this book to plan some lessons for my students, but I also used this book myself to help me understand what it is that I wanted to paint. And whenever I get stuck, whenever I get to a point where I start thinking, why even do this? Like how many canvases can one have? I go back to this book And I remember the real reason that I wanted to paint, the real reason that I'm an artist. For a lot of people, they kind of stop there because art is not stressed in schools. It's always considered an elective. It's considered as something just you kind of do for fun or a hobby, unless you are serious about art. For most people, it sort of ends there. And I think as adults, you might forget. You know very well how to express yourself visually, artistically, whether it's through painting and drawing or through photography, dance, music, whatever it is, anything that is sort of like a language that bypasses words, in a sense, bypasses us speaking, and someone else understands it almost immediately, and you form that connection. Find time to just get in the process, be in the process, and not overthink what's happening or worry about how it looks. And then there's also time to step back and see if there's something that needs to be fixed for the composition and so on. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch this, and I'd love your feedback. You can find me, my website is Hava Gurevich Art, and you can find me on Facebook, and you can find me on Instagram. It's also Hava Gurevich Art. And again, thank you for watching, and yeah, let me know what you think.